Hello. One of my students in China has just emailed me and said, I'm struggling to learn all of these new words. Have you got any advice or tips for me? So I sat and had a little think about that. And yes, I do have some tips. So listen up. So I think I'm going to relate a story to do this. And it's all about the main thing when you're trying to learn new words in English is to make that learning memorable. So the story is when I lived and worked in Russia, in St. Petersburg. We're talking about probably around the year 2000 here. And a group of us from the school where I worked, we walked across the road to a cafe where we often ate at lunchtime. And we thought we'd seen behind the counter some chicken with rice or something. And the Russian word for chicken is kuritsa. So we asked for kuritsa. And the lady behind the counter responded with a word that nobody understood, which had us all looking like that. We didn't know what she meant. So we repeated kuritsa, chicken. And she shouted back at us. And when I say shouted, she did actually shout. She shouted, Indiaka, Indiaka. And nobody knew what this word meant. It went back and forth like this a couple of times with us saying Kuritsa and her shouting back at us, Indiaka. Eventually we ordered whatever she said it was, Indiaka. And we realised then that it wasn't chicken we were eating, but it was turkey. So we understood at that point that Indiaka means turkey in Russian. But the situation, which probably lasted no longer than a minute, 90 seconds, it was so memorable that immediately there were five of us who had all learned a new Russian word there, which was in Indiaka for turkey. And that making learning memorable is so important. If you can make learning a new word memorable for yourself, you don't even need to try to remember it because it's then automatic. And I know because I saw these guys a couple of weeks ago in Beijing that at least two of those colleagues from that time in the year, I think it was probably 2000 or 2001, they remember the word as well, and they remember that situation. So, yeah, try and make learning vocabulary memorable in whatever way you can. I've tried this in class a couple of times with when teaching grammar. I had a student in Prague once. He was the sales director of an insurance company, and he kept making the same mistake. And I said to him in one class, "Look, I think I can help you to stop making this mistake, but you need to be ready for when I surprise you, and please don't be offended." So he said, "Okay, yeah, that's fine." So the next time he said it, I think it was like repeated, putting a to after should or must. So should to or must to do something. The next time he said it, I stood up and slammed my fists on the table and just shouted at him, should go, or whatever it was that he got wrong. And I corrected him by absolutely shouting at him and getting fake angry, if you like. And the poor bloke was quite shocked, but it worked. I'd made that learning memorable for him, so he remembered, and he stopped making that mistake that is what we would call a fossilized mistake. He just couldn't stop making the mistake. It was ingrained in his brain. So I managed to unfossilize it for him. So yeah, make things memorable. Other ways, I mean, there's a number of ways that students can use. Using like bits of card where you write the English on one side of the card and then on the other side you write your own language, and then you keep testing yourself. And if you have many cards, anytime you're on a bus, on the metro, you can do that with the cards and just try and practice that way. Really trying to engage in words. So when you see a new word, think about whether it's a verb or a noun or an adjective. So it's word class, where the stress is, if it's a multi-syllable word. Think about the word family. So, let's take the word decision, for example. So the noun, decision, the verb to decide, decisive as an adjective, or indecision, creating those word trees from one word. So if you get one word, you're learning then all of its related words, trying to put those words into a sentence. Write it down, write the sentence down. If you invest the time in the useful words and the word family, that time is worthwhile then, because then you've got a whole package of language rather than just one word. Something we looked at in class with this particular group of students was not learning words in isolation, so just one word. What words does it go with? What words collocate with that? So, we don't just say the word decide by itself. It's always with I or we, they decided to do something. So there's always a to after that. Decision, we usually say make a decision. So that's, you're learning words in phrases there, which if you know the phrase, helps you when you're listening, because then when you hear the phrase as a fast moving piece of language, you only need to pick up make decision and you've got the whole phrase then. So yeah, doing that sort of thing. A slightly odd one, but it might work for difficult words, is to an example might make it better. So the Japanese word for thank you is arigato. Arigato sounds in English a little bit like alligator, the sort of crocodile-looking animal. So arigato sounds like alligator. So you make a mental picture in your mind of perhaps an alligator biting someone's leg off and saying, "Oh, thank you," and then alligator, arigato. So that mental imagery, for some words or for some students, might be useful. I don't think I'd recommend it for every word. It would take a very long time. But again, it's that idea of creating the mental imagery makes that learning memorable. So yeah, there's three things there. Make it memorable, repetition frequently and often until you know it, creating those word trees, those word families, putting the words into sentences and with collocations, and mental imagery if you're really struggling. All right, thank you.